Well, one thing I never expected to hear in my life was, "You have a brain tumor." The next thing I never expected to hear in my life was, "You have brain cancer." In between, before all that and now, I remembered the one thing we spend the entirety of our life trying to forget. I'm gonna die. Not only that, but everyone we know, ever met, ever loved, ever hated, and everyone who ever drew a breath. We're all gonna die. You, me, everyone. So let's just get that out there in the open to start with. We're born and we die. When we're young and think we're healthy, we start forgetting this fact. I want to start with that reminder because when my life was flipped upside down, I forgot that fact. I'm reminding us of that universal law, not to be depressing or morbid, but as a reminder. If it's not cancer or crime, an accident, a heart attack, or injury, or old age, it's going to be something. So let's not put life on delay with the assumption we have time. Now is the time. I got that lesson hard and fast. In July 2016, I was at a coffee shop in downtown Detroit on my lunch break. Earlier in the day, I drank coffee, ran to the gym, did some strength training, walked back home, drank more coffee, and headed into work. I felt fine, as far as I can recall. I always felt fine. I gabbed with the baristas on my lunch break, when weird. I felt dizzy and nauseous. I was wondering, am I going to throw up? I put my head on the counter. Seconds or minutes or many minutes later, I came to on the floor with EMS crew asking me questions. Did I just pass out in front of an entire coffee shop of people? I was mortified, totally embarrassed. It's got to be too much caffeine, probably, right? Or not enough water. Maybe. I called my office, told them I had fainted at the coffee shop across the park, and EMS was taking me to DMC, to make sure I didn't have a brain bleed or anything worse than a concussion. I had never been in an ambulance before, and God willing, I'll never have to ride in one again. I think I felt so bad I started to cry. So yeah, it was all starting to kick in. I was in and out of head injury la la land and got what seemed like every test in the book before the emergency room doctor soberly came to me and said, "We're going to schedule you for the soonest available MRI tonight because you have a brain tumor." It was probably another blessing that I was a little out of it because while I was scared, it didn't seem to register fully. But I did have a profound feeling in that MRI, which will be the first of many for the duration of my life remaining. Did you ever watch that episode of the TV show with Steve Carell, The Office? You know the episode where Michael Scott is giving out office awards he calls the Dundies? Remember the part where Pam drinks one too many adult beverages and she's pretty lit, puts her Dundie trophy in the air and yells, "I feel God in this Chili's tonight." That was me in the MRI machine. I knew I had a tumor by then, but I didn't know what kind or what was next. I felt the deepest sense of something other than I ever felt in my whole life. I felt something in that MRI machine, and it wasn't that devastating state of fear one would expect. In that 40-minute or so journey in a tunnel, lots of, as everyone who gets MRIs knows, lots of clang, 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 beep, 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 ew, clang, clang, clang. I thought nothing I was obsessing over before right now was important. I remembered I love my family. I love my friends. I love the people I've met. I love life. I love life so much. Honestly, that was it. Fortunately, they decided I did not need an emergency surgery right then and there. They sometimes do, but mine appeared to be fairly chill up in there. So while the seizures were a bad sign and the tumor was the size of an avocado pit in my deep left temporal lobe, I had some time to shop around hospitals and surgeons. Okay, we've gotten to the part where the brain tumor was discovered, and we're only like a tiny millionth into the story, so I'll speed it up. My tumor discovery was scary, but the world didn't end. I had a family connection with neurosurgery at Henry Ford Hospital downtown Detroit, so I went there. I was ushered to Dr. Air, who specializes in epilepsy and deep temporal surgeries that may involve the hippocampus. That's her jam, and she has more insight into like the cutting edge tools and interventions for that area. So I'm going to talk about this. I did a bunch of wacky tests, a neuropsych exam and a really cool test called a WADA, where they turned off each side of my brain and asked me questions. I could talk about that all day, but I don't have a million hours to gab about it. So I did all that before surgery. I learned a lot about how my weirdo brain works and how cool brains are and all that. But the gist of all those tests was, yeah, Molly, your brain is broken. Also, you're left-handed, but your brain kind of operates like a right-handed male or something. Anyway, takeaway, I didn't need to be awake for my surgery. My craniotomy was scheduled the first week of October in 2016. The surgery went well, I healed well, and I remained confident afterwards that the test results would be peachy and my life would quickly get back to normal, which in retrospect has me wondering what normal even means anymore. But that too is another story. I didn't expect, not for a single second, that I would get a cancer diagnosis. I thought I just had like a bubble in my brain that needed to be like taken out or popped, that afterwards I'd be fine. I assumed maybe from a place of willing denial that my tumor was benign, that surely a healthy young person like me wouldn't get a worser diagnosis because I'm fine. I mean, Henry Ford, they brought up things like oncology, radiation, and chemo, but I don't know how well I was listening. It's all such a muddle when you're wading through it, and I wasn't processing it all, and I certainly wasn't Googling it at that time. I was waiting for the results of the biopsy, which I knew would take about 10 days or so. Just the same, I wasn't really ready for that phone call. And that phone call, that's the day my world was truly upended. That's the day the world crashed around me. It was easily the worst day of my life. I say that now because that was the day everything got real in a deep and profound sort of way. And the phone call was my introduction to my neuro-oncologist, Dr. Snyder. I had never met him, but he sounded perfectly calm and not sad sounding or scary when he told me the diagnosis. And the diagnosis was quite serious. He said I had a grade 3 anaplastic astrocytoma, which in layman's terms is like a junior flavor glioblastoma. And a glioblastoma is what Beau Biden and John McCain had, for example. So I had the junior flavor. A GBM is actually a grade 4 astrocytoma, if that helps. Grades 1 and 2 are generally benign, not always, but by and large. And 3 and 4 are malignant. The malignant ones, they're fast, they're angry, and they generally like to have encore performances. In addition, brain cancers are graded and not staged. Graded, not staged. There's the blood-brain barrier, which is a great and terrible barrier. Great in that most brain cancers can't really metastasize. There might be very few exceptions, like the thyroid or something, and maybe the spinal area. I'm not an expert on that stuff, so I really don't know. The bad news, the blood-brain barrier, has a lot to do with why chemos are kind of last resort part of brain cancer treatment. In any case, that's the easiest way for me to explain. If you ever see like news media talking about brain cancer staging, they're misinformed or they're talking about another cancer that has metastasized to the brain. And yes, sometimes you can have a brain cancer and a whole other cancer, but that's a separate story you probably didn't like turn this on to hear or learn about. Anyway, Dr. Snyder, my neuro-oncologist, he told me my diagnosis. And I was stunned. I could feel my heart pounding and I wanted to cry or scream. So I asked him if I could call him back. I certainly still had a sense of not wanting to embarrass myself or make things super weird with my new doctor. So I asked him if I could call him back. He told me, of course, and if I could get myself to Henry Ford, West Bloomfield anytime that day, he'd be very happy to clarify. So I said, yes, please, that. And I hung up the phone. Then I screamed. Like, I really screamed. I wasn't some feisty hero from a fantasy novel facing certain death villain with like bravery and courage. I was absolutely terrified. My mind was reeling. Cancer happened to like other people, sick people, old people, distant friends or relations, but not me. I never felt sick. I never even had a headache. Like, how could I have brain cancer? I was really healthy. I worked really hard to be healthy. So yeah, the day I got the phone call was the day the world ended. But it was also the day my life like started new. After that, I moved quickly into the max radiation and chemo cycle, followed by a solid year of chemo. And now, about 2.5 years in, I just take daily anti-seizure meds and get regular MRIs every 3 months. So this is another thing I always have to clarify. Let me be clear. I'm not cured. I'm not even in remission. My cancer is not fixed. We expect it to return either as itself or glioblastoma at some point in my life. It is a terminal diagnosis. A month from now, 6 months from now, 2 years, 5 or 10 or more, we don't know. And that's okay. I'm learning how to be okay with that. And that's another life lesson. We don't know a lot of things. Life is a total hodgepodge. It's a total hodgepodge of things that happen and keep happening. And while it doesn't often seem like it, we can only really control what we're going to do with the hodgepodge pile of things that appear to randomly be tossed at us. I have found for me that the best way to tackle challenges and disappointment and fear and grief is to allow myself to have those feelings. I cry. I acknowledge the jealousy I feel sometimes toward those who appear to have no visible challenges or viewable disappointments. I feel those things. I acknowledge my ugly side, like it's there. I got an ugly side. But after giving myself however long I need to have those feelings, I move on. Because those feelings, they have no other use for me. I have things to do, even as simple as laundry or getting a coffee or making dinner or walking the dogs. There's only so long I can let my emotions rule the day because life continues onward. Life continues onward with or without my consent sometimes. So yeah, I can thank my diagnosis for that new perspective. See, the world started new after that diagnosis. And I kid you not, it is a better life, even if I gained like 30 plus pounds. It's a life filled with purpose and a life filled with meaning. Like, I don't get as worked up over tiny life inconveniences as I once did, though my boyfriend may beg to differ. Like, I've cried over really crazy minor stuff and handled major things with an admirable sort of take charge stoicism. But I find power in speaking and writing my story with complete honesty. I'm blessed with a terrible diagnosis. And yes, I said blessed. I know that sometimes people are weirded out by that, whatever. I'm blessed with a terrible diagnosis that causes me very little and noticeable issues. It's a ticking time bomb, but it's my ticking time bomb. I'm grateful to have very little to complain about, so I use this diagnosis as a kind of booster. It's like a boot on the butt that got me going. I spent my first 36 years waiting for life to happen to me. So I guess it did, finally. Life happened to me. A few months into my cancer treatment, my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. My mom was my guard and my shield. I don't think I learned how to actually be a grown adult person until she was diagnosed. She passed away almost a year after her diagnosis. But when she was diagnosed, I felt like I had to stop being like this fragile, wimpy baby of the family and learn how to advocate for patients who don't have the ability or know how to speak, to doctors, to other patients. I wanted to help her and other people feel less scared, less alone, less a victim of circumstance, so we can share our stories in ways our medical teams can't always do. They can't really do it anyway, because cancer patients probably learn as much or even more sometimes from other patients than they do doctors. It's a different kind of knowledge. It's experience. It's living with it. And I wanted to be a voice my mom would be proud of. I think she was proud, and I think she still is. There's a sort of confidence and impulse to truly live when you're confronted with the fact that your life timeline might be a lot shorter than most folks, But it can be very liberating too, because life is terminal for everyone. It's this crazy little fire-filled adventure and, in the grand scheme of things, short for us all. My brain has turned into a pithy motivational card, maybe, but the one thing I've learned since an unwelcome roommate has taken residence in my brain. Live your best life, and live it right now. And I guess what I'm saying is, sometimes the worst things that happen to you can be flipped. It's completely within your wheelhouse. You have to find a way to get yourself there. And hopefully, eventually, after the fear, the hurt, and the anger, your best side, your inner best, it's in there. And you have a choice. You can continue to mourn the life you might have had, or live the life you are given with all the love and juice and passion you have. Time's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's neither here nor there nor a thing we can control. We control our now. That's all. And maybe that can be enough. So I'm going to end this long ramble with a quote from my favorite, as many of you know, from Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. Should we continue to look upwards? Is the light we can see in the sky one of those which will presently be extinguished? The ideal is terrifying to behold, brilliant but threatened on all sides by the dark forces that surround it. Nevertheless, no more in danger than a star in the jaws of the clouds. So yeah, continue to look upwards. Look upwards and onward. Ever onward.